Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the latest in Venture webinar, Venture Forge's webinar series. It's probably the only webinar that I've opened up where we've had to just kind of curtail the laughter between the kind of panelists before I come on screen. So if I start speaking a little bit garbled, that's pretty much Mr. Finch's fault, but hopefully that's kind of sets the scene for a good webinar and some good conversation that's to come. So for today, we're going to be talking to you about Amazon vendor mastery and winning strategies for marketplace success. I want to go on to introduce our guests in a second, but I think for those of you that are on the call and have joined us that recognise some of these faces, hopefully what you'll see is we've actually got some of the kind of biggest hitters in the Amazon vendor space joining us today. So no pressure to our panelists. We'll come on to intros in a second, but I'm really excited by this conversation. Today is one of our regular webinars. It's not a sales pitch for Venture Forge, but I would be probably not doing my job if I didn't just take 30 seconds to introduce us and what we do before I open up the floor to the panelists to do the same from their businesses. Venture Forge is an Amazon partner for brands. We are one of the UK's most commercial focused partners, helping brands drive profit across Amazon vendor and Amazon seller. I would normally say we are the most, but I think when you look at the panelists and guests that we've got, we are certainly one of the most. I'm in some really good company today for today's webinar. Before I go on to just talk about something else I want to introduce today, can I just let you guys have a quick 30 seconds, say hello, introduce yourselves and say who you are? I think maybe James, probably start with you first, if that's all right.
Yeah, good morning, Andrew. Thank you for the invitation. My name's James Wakefield. I'm the founder of an agency called Wake, and we are a very Amazon vendor-focused agency. So working typically with consumer brands, typically existing vendors who have got to a certain level and kind of need some extra support in terms of just driving the channel forward. And that typically comes down to issues around catalog management, optimizing assets, dealing with kind of the operational side of Vendor Central, so all the trickery around labeling, order processing, getting stock into Amazon without them punishing you for doing certain things wrong. But we also cover, marketing strategy. So fairly holistic, service focused, very much on Vendor Central. So grateful for you, inviting me to participate in this conversation. Thank you.
Great, thanks for joining us, James. I think to the right of you on my screen, we've got Mr. Matt Briggs, who I know reasonably well. Matt, over to you. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning. Cheers, Andy. So my name's Matt Briggs. I've been working with Amazon vendor for about 6 years in total. So I've got experience across working in distribution, direct to manufacturer, and most recently as a senior account manager here at Venture Forge. So my focus is predominantly on Vendor Central, overall strategy, how to grow the business with a medium to long-term view.
Right, thank you very much, Matt. And then dropping down to the bottom right, Bruno, good morning. Just find that mute button.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the invite, Andy. So I'm Bruno Ferreira, and I own BlueDot Ecommerce. We work 100% focus with vendors on their internal setup. So we help vendors to align compliances, SOPs, how does the different parts of the cross-functional team should communicate, and how to use the tools that are available, how to, as an example, the salesperson that should have an holistic view and to help everybody basically. So we just help them to step on board with all of those details that generate a lot of challenges in the day-to-day of supplying Amazon directly through vendor.
Great, thank you, Bruno. Thanks for joining us this morning. And then finally, but last but not least, Mr. Ant Finch, good morning.
Morning, Andy. Thanks for having me. My name's Ant Finch. I'm founder of Vendor Rocket, and at Vendor Rocket, I specialise in supporting brands with the development of short, medium, and long-term strategies to help break through to that next level of profitable growth.
Fantastic. I'm very, very privileged to have you actually dialing in from a client this morning. So thank you for fitting us into your ever busy schedule. And I know you've got a flight back home later today, so thanks for joining us. Final little bit of a kind of push from me this morning before we get into the crux of the conversation, where thankfully I have to do a lot less talking. Just a quick reminder that we have got the Marketplace Awards up and running still, with just 3 weeks left for entries. almost everybody you see on the screen is a judge of the Marketplace Awards and helping us find and unearth the real kind of success stories in Amazon in the UK coming out of 23 into 24. So if you haven't yet entered, entries are still open for the next 3 weeks, and that's available at themarketplaceawards.com with an awards ceremony in London. Final date yet to be confirmed, but end of April, early May, where we're putting on a great event in conjunction with our partner Perpetua as well. So if you've not yet entered, there are 3 weeks left. It will probably take you a couple of days to write your entry. So yeah, have a look at the marketplaceawards.com and drop us a line through there if you need any support or help with your entry. Okay, quick bit of fun before we get started and start to kind of probe into your guys, your knowledge. Before we do, can we just pop a quick poll? Hopefully my glamorous assistant Whitney's busy working in the background. How far along are you in the audience with developing your brand strategy for 2024 on Amazon? Now, this may seem like an odd question to ask on day 29 of February, 2 months in. But when we ran this on our last webinar, there were some pretty unexpected answers. So it'd be interesting to see how far along are you in developing your strategy for Amazon for 2024. I'm just going to hold for a second. We'll see the results coming in. We've actually got quite a few people on the call. We've got 71 with us today. We've got 43. So we're kind of 2/3 of the way through the votes coming in. And actually what's still really standing out here are we've got a number of people that haven't started yet. Thankfully, that's kind of dropped a lot since the last webinar. But we've still got pretty much half of respondents in the planning stage. About a quarter, 29% are in the early planning stages. Another third, let's say, are well into the planning process. So hopefully today's conversation will be quite useful because it still feels like we've got a lot of people in that planning phase. So without further ado then, let's get into the crux of this. I think Bruno's had enough. He's back. Bruno's back. He's back in the room. Let's start with the first question, guys. So I've got about 12 questions in front of me. To those in the audience, we've got the questions tab in the bottom right-hand corner. Get those questions coming in. Anything you want to ask our panel overall or any particular expert we've got, get those questions coming in. And we'll get to that in the last 10 or 15 minutes of today's call. But let me start out one of mine first, guys, if you don't mind. Something quite generic given where people are in their planning stages. How do you see vendors setting themselves apart in an increasingly competitive marketplace? Anybody in particular want to take that? Ant, is that something you feel comfortable taking on?
Yeah, I don't mind throwing my view in on this. So I think for me, there are 3 core areas that brands really need to be focusing on to set themselves apart, particularly when it comes to a vendor relationship with Amazon. I think the first one is recognizing that it is practically impossible to scale up and run a very profitable vendor business with one person. And it's those that recognise that you need to start to increase in an internal team, external resource with agencies. There are lots of good agencies around that can help boost your expertise and knowledge on Amazon. So I think that's absolutely key in any part of planning. I think long gone are the days where you've got a national account manager juggling Amazon and eBay and any other pure players that they're trying to manage. You really need to have that focused approach. Getting down into a bit more kind of tactical view, it's I think content for me, I'm a big fan of implementing seasonal content. So I've seen some big improvements in conversion rate and traffic, particularly if you're optimizing content for Easter or Valentine's Day or Mother's Day, whatever it is. So having a really I guess a proactive approach to how your brand is viewed on Amazon will set you apart. A lot of traditional FMCG brands tend to update their content once a year and then it's done and then off they go. I think that's the old world. I think the new world is it needs to be more regular. And then finally, it's exclusive. So this Amazon specific products that hit a price point, that hit a margin expectation, both for Amazon and the vendor, that allow you to really get behind them and optimize the performance. I think they're real game changers for brands. So that they would be the top 3 for me.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I was about to kind of go on towards a quick question towards James there, but I think he's possibly having some connectivity issues. I think what was interesting to me though was your thoughts on the team side of things. I think it's something that we hear quite a bit as an agency is I have a person doing Amazon, I have a person doing it. And actually when we look at the skill set that's involved in Amazon, and Bruno, in our previous conversations, you've opened me up to this so much more. it's not, even if you're just doing the demand generation side of Amazon, you've got content skill set, you've got design skill set, you've got a strategic skill set, you've got a advertising skill set, and then you drop into Bruno's world on operations and the back of house. There's an entirely different skill set there. So I think it's good to hear you call that out, and the team part of it is really essential. And trying to get one person to do all of that is a nigh on impossible task.
Yeah, and what will happen is when it is just one person, they will spend a majority of their time firefighting. So they won't be growing, they won't be trying to move the business forward. It will all be about managing issues in the back end, and then you hear brands going, "Oh, my business is not moving forward." Well, okay, well let's look at how it's being managed, and it normally kind of follows suit.
Yeah, good shout. Thank you, and James. Anybody else got anything else to add on to that particular answer or question?
I will just add from Ant's words. So for me, it's so important, the first point that Ant mentioned, that cross-functional team. It cannot be just one person. That's the old world, let's call it like that, because you need to have specific skills in each one of the pillars: sales, logistics, and finance. And of course, the sales main point of contact can be that person not being their manager, maybe, but needs to have that holistic view. They all need to have an understanding how Amazon vendor works in each one of their silos, let's call it like that. And communication between them, it's so important. I tie that to the success of a vendor these days. It's so important.
What are your thoughts, James, on because I kind of touched around the whole team structure there, but one thing I didn't call out was the commercial side of that. So you've got that kind of that negotiation, getting the commercial basis with Amazon. Is that still an opportunity for vendors to set themselves apart? And is that still kind of a key pillar for success on Amazon with vendor? Is that strength of commercial negotiation absolutely fundamental still?
Oh, absolutely. It's many vendors start their relationship with Amazon on the vendor side. Just list all of your products, list everything so we can see your catalog. So there's not really any commercial thought that goes into that. I'm a big believer in making sure that whenever you start your Amazon journey, whether you've been working with Amazon for 2 or 3 years or you're just starting out, be really clear of what your margin target is, be really clear of what your sales target is, not just for year one, but think 2, 3, 4, 5 years ahead, because then everything you do is informed by that target. So if someone's going, "Oh, load this product because we think it will sell," if it doesn't hit your margin target or it's not going to deliver to your top line sales, don't launch it. Yeah, and really be clear about adding stuff that's gonna bring you the value you kind of need and want on Amazon. And I think so yes, it's more and more now with the teams that I work with on the vendor side. I just want to understand the commercial side of everything we're doing, because without that, you can't drive the front end. You just can't do it.
Just to add to that point as well, a lot of vendors, when they initially launch with Amazon on Vendor Central, will commit to terms that they don't really understand at that point, and then those terms are fixed in the account, and you're expected to pay them year on year and probably increase them year on year as well. So I think having a measured approach when you first start out with vendors is really important.
That's a great point, Matt.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, Andrew. That's a great point, because usually vendors are so happy and proud, and they should, to be invited to be a vendor to Amazon. But then what they don't know is that when the honeymoon is over, they didn't consider a couple of the points, like your first terms are always the basis for the next ones. So it's so important that you establish to start good terms and what data has Amazon on their side. So it's very important that first negotiation, when we receive the invitation, to have this support if you don't have experience and talent in-house. To come to this amazing group and just get that support. Okay, let's start. Let's split the catalog. Let's avoid price matching. Let's start properly on vendor, because then next year everybody will be in a better place to negotiate.
And if we're being completely honest, Amazon is quite good at bamboozling, or there's a bit of trickery that goes on during the onboarding phase. Certainly whenever any kind of trade terms negotiations come through, there's just so many acronyms, so many programs, different types of co-op, contra cogs, trade terms, all the rest of it. It's very rare that we've come across a vendor or a client who is actually sophisticated in that area to know what is going on. And Amazon does take advantage of that. You know, they are quite ruthless in terms of their commercial relationships. So having that support, having someone or a team who understands that, I think is actually absolutely crucial. And going back to Ant's point around commercial awareness, really, you know, that is the key thing, because if you go in blind, you're going to end up in actually a sticky situation, and Amazon's going to be the beneficiary, not you.
Always. I think everybody here already knows my analogy about what it is to start with Amazon. It's a poker game. It's like if your best friend is a poker champion and invites you for a poker game, and you never played the game, you don't know the rules, but you accept to play, obviously you will lose. Is that your best friend that invited you, or you that accepted to play a game without knowing the rules? I think it's the vendor's fault, because he should look for, first of all, the talent internally, and if he has no one, to search outside. One of the common things that my clients, when we start working, they say is like, oh, no, my team is experienced. They were managing eBay and our web shop. And then I always say the same. Yeah, it's not the same. They need training. They need to understand all the details. So it's so important when they start to align everything from the start.
Okay, a couple of questions that are coming out of this. I'll probably come maybe in your direction, Matt and Dan first. We've talked a fair bit about the importance of getting those commercial terms right. What are the kind of key parts of an Amazon negotiation and trade terms that a vendor should really be focusing on? What are the most valuable parts of that negotiation? What are the most important parts? And where should a vendor be looking to make sure they get real value and understanding out of the Amazon relationship?
Yeah, I'll start off on that one. So I think the key thing here is knowing what you want to achieve on Amazon and what your long-term strategy is with Amazon. So the terms that you agree should be brand specific to your brand. So, for example, if handling returns internally is a problem, or returns become an issue, talking about something like a damage allowance, putting a percentage in for that is always a good shout. It's quite easy to get tied into a big co-op accrual, and the co-op accrual is very generic, and you don't necessarily know what you get back for that. I think the key point is to understand what you want to get from Amazon in year 1, 2, and 3, and make sure your terms are built to support that, rather than just agreeing to things blindly and not knowing exactly what you have agreed to.
Good shout. Thanks, Matt. Ant, any more thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it depends, as Matt has said, where you are in your relationship with Amazon, what terms and what services you want to unlock. I think AVS is an interesting service for brands if used correctly, but the cost of that can vary depending on the category and the sort of brand you are and the size of brand you are. But I think all of those things, what the vendor needs to do is understand what Amazon's offering, because they will pitch all of these services, and then it's up to the vendor to really understand what that service is going to do, how it's going to work, how it needs to be managed, understand what the cost is, to then make sure that it adds value to what they're doing. And Amazon will always find ways to take your money. There's no question about it. Your responsibility is to make sure that you're investing in the right areas that will help you achieve your top level objective around profit, market share, sales growth. So I would always go into an AVN going, what's on the table? What can we do? And that might not just be on front end activation, by the way. That might be back end activation with Pix or any of the supply chain programs that they've got in place that will have a cost associated that could have a meaningful impact on your bottom line further downstream. So I think it's just go in with an open mind, but understand each of them before you pass kind of judgment on whether or not it's right for your business.
And just to add to that as well, and I think is understand what's been put forward, understand what works for your business, but also take time to look at the data and follow the data and make sure everything makes sense. You don't have to rush into any decisions. Like Amazon will often drag out an AVN for months and months, so there's no need to be really hasty with your decisions. Yeah,
and document everything.
I will just add to this point, guys, that let's go way back to Jeff Bezos' startup, and keep in mind that Vendor Central was the first Amazon. and was created. Jeff Bezos' vision was always long-term partnerships. And I see a lot of vendors when they step into the vendor negotiation without the proper preparation, working the data, and actually go with asks, not just give away, but also ask something in return. And I've seen a lot of vendors, they always start with I Amazon, and need to increase this. But if we're talking about a long-term partnership, we should be using we. And I advise all my clients to always mention in the emails we, because we are partners. And let's keep that in mind. Amazon vendor is a B2B relationship, and Amazon advertises it, wants it, a long-term one. So I want to see more people to start using the we, because it's a long-term partnership.
But that's really interesting, Bruno. So the thing I was going to add to this was, I think people confuse what Amazon vendor actually is, and they get fearful of this big machine that's negotiating with this algorithm that's trying to drive the price down. I think in some of mine and Ant's conversations, we've always come back to, it's a buyer-seller relationship. It's somebody buying something from your business. I had a conversation, I'll be careful how I describe this so I don't open the person up, but I had a conversation with a very senior person in Amazon UK that leads one of the buying departments, one of the vendors, entire category. And that person was probably one of the 15th longest serving employee in Amazon Europe. So it gives you an idea of the seniority of this particular person. They described their role as, I'm just a buyer, I'm just a category manager, I am just dealing with people that sell me their products, and my job is to pull a range together. I think people miss that at either end of this conversation, it's two people. One person is trying to sell some goods, one person is trying to buy some goods to then sell them to a consumer. It then gets wrapped up in this technical platform and this technical negotiation process, and everybody gets hung up on the acronyms and the complexity. I think you're absolutely right, Bruno. It's a partnership. It's two people trying to sell goods to each other. And if you can take a step back and look at it on a much more holistic, longer term partnership basis, I suspect a lot more negotiations will be a lot more successful.
It's also very important to speak the same language. I also see that as a challenge for a lot of the vendors, because sometimes they get lost, not just in the acronyms, because a quick search on Google can help with that, but the way of thinking. If you don't understand what Amazon vendor is, how it works, you won't understand what you're being asked. So it helps a lot to know all of these details, how it works, and what's my plan next year, 2 years, 3 years, and always be on board with the vendor manager and work on that. But always do those asks, because it's we. It's not myself and you. It's we, basically.
Thank you very much, James. I want to come back to this kind of second strand that I picked up from an earlier question. And you said something at the beginning about the importance of content, those regular updates. And James, in your intro, you talked about how your agency does a lot of work around catalog management. What strategies have you seen vendors deploy, James, that are successful when it comes to catalog management and optimization on vendors? It sounds like it's not just a case of upload and off you go anymore. ANSI is much more important in the content management. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, what we see is that the kind of profile of brands on Vendor Central is typically quite different to what you might see on Seller Central. Obviously, Vendor is an invite-only program. It's kind of Amazon's strategic channel. It's the one where they're deciding who they kind of want to onboard and work closely with. And typically that means it's full of established consumer brands. The criteria has actually been tightened this year. So this year they've got a list of brands that they want to onboard onto Vendor. And if you're not on the list, then you're probably not going to get through. But what that means is that these brands are typically available within the wider market. You know, there might be in other retailers, grocers, etc. And inevitably what happens with those types of brands is that people get hold of their product, they list it on Amazon often before the brand has kind of engaged with the channel. And we see a lot of mess basically in terms of illegitimate product listings, duplicates, kind of random bundles that resellers have just put together. And obviously the content is also pretty rubbish, because these resellers aren't particularly invested in the brand. They're invested in sort of making a quick buck, essentially. So for brands that are on Vendor, especially, I think the first port of call should really be to understand what is going on with your brand on the channel currently. There's no point going in blind and just sort of listing your catalogue and expecting that to flourish. Before you do that, you really need to understand, okay, what products of mine have already been listed, which ones have been listed correctly with the correct barcodes. Can we jump on those? Because on vendor, you've got to have the correct barcode for any products that you're sending in to Amazon. There's no kind of relabeling or over-labeling like you would see with FBA. So yeah, what I would kind of describe as sort of brand control is the first port of call. And then it gets into product selection. So understanding what your top sellers are or are likely to be, and then kind of really focusing on those, nurturing them, investing in the content, creating Amazon specific content. So that means doing keyword research. If you've not got keywords in the content, then there's a sort of low chance that your products are going to show up in search for those keywords. So that should definitely be part of any sort of text-based optimization process. And then the kind of creative aspects of the product imagery, graphics, drilling into kind of A+ content, storefronts, all of this kind of contributes to the buyer experience, which is obviously going to increase engagement, increase conversion rates, but don't sort of do it across the whole catalog. You know, be strategic and focused in terms of the products that you're actually investing in. Because as an example, you know, we've worked on catalogs where the products might run into the thousands, yet it's typically only the top 20 to 50 products that are actually driving the revenue. So focus on those, get them as good as they can be, and keep evolving them, keep looking at them, moving keywords around, making the content better. And that's what will drive better rankings, better conversion rates, and obviously increased sales.
I think for me that's another of the questions for me there, James, when you talked about what we call the hero ASINs, those 20 to 30 that would fly out of that massive catalogue. So many brands for me still miss that market analysis. Where is the opportunity on Amazon? Which products will work, and do I therefore need to list 100, 1,000, 2,000? We've got one client in our pipeline that's looking at 50,000 ASINs, and our pushback right from James, your face says everything. You know, it's commercially not viable to run a business proactively on that level, and it's also commercially not worthwhile. We can say right from the outset, there's an 80-20 rule in that catalogue. Some of the stuff you're selling will not be being bought. So I think starting with that top level, where's the opportunity to then drive down, as you've quite rightly said, into that, where should I focus, and then how do you manage the peripheries, is so important, because you can become a very, very busy fool trying to get all of that content into a really good place when actually there's no commercial payback from the vast majority of that work if you get it wrong.
Yeah, and I think a really important component of this is what I would describe as kind of category awareness. And let's be honest, it's pretty difficult to do on Amazon. You know, they're a closed book. Everyone knows about Helium-10, which can kind of give you estimates on individual ASINs, but it's not any good for looking at the big picture. You know, if I'm selling popcorn, for example, if a brand wants to come in to that segment on Amazon, we want to kind of understand how big is the popcorn segment on Amazon. Has it grown? Has it declined over the last 12 months? Who's sort of dominating? Who's got market share? How are their positions moving? And where does our brand slot into that? And the only way you can do that really is through some pretty expensive enterprise level tools. There's maybe 3 or 4 out there, but you're kind of looking at maybe between £20,000 to £100,000 a year plus.
Yeah.
So it's only really practical for agencies to kind of have those kind of subscriptions. So we're doing a lot of that to understand what's the kind of size of the prize, but almost more importantly, how are our clients tracking within the segment that they're playing in? Because it's all well and good saying our sales are up or down this month, but what does that look like in the context of the actual category?
that for me, my background and my business partner Jonathan's background is working in retail. When we started our weekly trade meetings, we never started off with our data. We started off with the market data. If we've shrunk by 10% and we share that news within the business, that sounds diabolical. If the market shrunk by 20% and we've shrunk by 10, that's actually a really good week's performance. So having that market context is fundamental to understand, is your strategy working, or even what should your strategy be? I think coming back to that team point that we all talked about at the beginning, and it's very easy to miss where an agency also does add value, James, and you've quite rightly called out some of those tools, some of that technology that a lot of brands can't afford to invest in within their Amazon P&L, sit within agencies because we can buy it at a price and work it across 20, 30, 40 clients. So I think there's another advantage there when you think about not just the team part of that question, but you've also got the resource, the general resource question of tech stack, tools, capability that just might not be able to exist in a brand. I was wondering with the question maybe a little bit back of house, and thanks for your thoughts on all of that, James. We've talked a lot about also this commercial, the front end, the growth side of it at the moment, but I know, Bruno, you've got a lot of expertise, and I'm going to be really bold here on the non-sexy stuff, that stuff that sits back of house, but actually is where often the money is made or lost. You know, if you've got really poor back of house efficiencies, you can really be leaking a lot of profit. So what are your thoughts on that, Bruno? What are the critical elements of creating that kind of compelling and successful back of house internal operations side of things?
So it starts, of course, with that cross-functional team, the Amazon vendor cross-functional team. Even for smaller brands, small vendors, it's very important that they have, if you can't have someone dedicated to each one of the pillars, at least try to have people that will be looking at each one of their parts. And starting from there, defining that cross-functional team. It's very important that after you start working on those compliant standard operating processes, everybody needs to be involved. Everybody needs to be aware how Amazon vendor works on the different sites. And why is that so useful for success? Because it gets everybody outside of their silos and talking the same language. They will know that each task is supposed to be done by accounting. But accounting noticed that there's a deduction for a shortage claim. It needs to have that process to communicate with the main point of contact from sales, so that that person can start the dispute aligned with the logistic point of contact to get the documentation needed to verify what happened. I would also mention here those very strong compliant standard operating processes. I continue to see vendors giving me answers that, oh, we have years of experience with shipments, we sell here, we sell there, we will be okay. It's not like that sometimes. You need to start analyzing, first of all, small details like preferred carriers. Sometimes vendors think that they work with this carrier in Spain, but that carrier might not be a preferred one in Italy. So it needs to be evaluated on that side. And then how is your warehouse team working? Do they know how to pick and pack to Amazon? We all know here how picky Amazon fulfillment centers are when they are receiving the goods in. And they will be helping basically to reduce those shortage claims, avoiding chargebacks. You all know my opinion about chargebacks. Chargebacks are not recoverable. They are not shortage claims. Chargebacks are a GPS, a map to fix the internal setup and to go and identify those root causes and fix them. And after that, very important, this constant performance monitoring and evaluation and improvement. If you start with a setup, you're a new vendor, you recognize that you needed help, you went to someone like one of the good people in the group, and what we design, build, and implement might be different 6 months ahead, because then there will be new data. Let's evaluate. You're having a lot of shortage claims. Okay, so how many fulfillment centers are you delivering? 12. But actually, 90% of those shortage claims are being caused by 2 fulfillment centers. And you have something there to go to Amazon as a partner and say, okay, guys, I'm delivering the same group of ASINs to these 12 fulfillment centers, but only 2 are showing this high level of chargebacks, and Amazon will be there to support. We know that the support team sometimes lack that knowledge and how things work, but we need to push them, and if we need to escalate, because it's logic. If you are delivering to 12 fulfillment centers and more than 90% of the shortage claims are being caused by 2 of them, there's something there, and it's not probably just our fault, and we need to evaluate. So this constant monitoring and evaluation and improvement, it's also very important.
Thank you, Bruno. I think something you said there really resonates with me kind of partway through your conversation, was the whole chargebacks piece. The whole Amazon vendor space now seems to be full of chargeback businesses that can get you a load of money back from Amazon on a no-win, no-fee basis, and in return they'll take 30%, 25% and keep that. And there's so many brands that are going, great, that's fantastic, look back for 2 years, pull me that cash back in and off we go. And what's being missed to me there is there's still 25, 30% left on the table that will continually leak. And I think across our client portfolio in the last 3 or 4 months, there's been somewhere in the region of £150,000 of recoveries. Now, if that goes through a chargeback recovery company and there's 30% of that left on the table, that's a hell of a lot of money still leaking out of somebody's P&L at a point where Amazon are putting pressure on that P&L from every angle. So I think to just put that chargeback solution in place, like you said, use the chargebacks as that pointer to where is the problem, go and fix the problem, and then you're not leaking that 20 to 30 to whatever percent out to a chargeback recovery company. It stays in the P&L right from the outset. I think chargeback companies have a great role to play in getting a chunk back, but not in plugging the leaks going forward. And you've got to fix your underlying business.
I think it's very important here, Andy, to mention that, first of all, I understand for a vendor, it's better to have 75% of something or 100% of nothing. So I understand the business model, but what we do in BlueDot is we have the complete and transparency with everybody saying chargebacks are not shortage claims. You don't, yes, evaluate them, dispute them, you have 30 days for that. But let's think about what's a chargeback. So a chargeback was created so that Amazon can warn a vendor that something is not compliant or fit into the stock in, the goods in model of Amazon. First of all, a vendor will never change it. So if you cannot change something, you need to adapt. The way to adapt for something that you cannot recover, and I will mention this point again, chargebacks, a very minimum percentage of them can be recovered. And I'm thinking about in the US, where we have the majority of the vendors with that Amazon collects from them. And if the vendor did the shipment process properly and Amazon got delayed collecting or delivering to the fulfillment center, yes, you can dispute the chargeback because it wasn't my fault. You're collecting and you are delivering, and it's your own service. And Amazon is very quick reversing those deductions on those chargebacks. There's a few more that, yes, you can dispute. Other than that, Amazon, I think, so one of these days I'll get beaten in the street for saying stuff like this, but I think Amazon plays a fair game if you know the rules. And Amazon waives for new vendors 30, 60, 90 days, depending on the country they are in. So just think that for 90 days, you can learn with it. You can go, Amazon will say, okay, you did this wrong and I'm waiving it. But please pay attention next time, or when the period is over, I will start charging you back. So I understand that for a vendor, it's better to have 75% of something than 100% of nothing. But keep in mind that chargebacks are not that easy recoverable as a shortage claim. Not that the shortage claim is easy to dispute, but it's not that easy, and we should take that in internally with that cross-functional team properly trained, talking the same language, and all sit in a table once a month and say, okay, guys, we still have 60 days of grace period with Amazon, but we are seeing this on the operational side. What's causing this? What's causing this? Carton content. Okay, carton content. Let's talk with the warehouse pick and pack team. Do they know how to pick and pack? Prep issues. Okay, we need to change it, guys. We need bubble wrap for our products. And that's how you fix chargebacks. Yeah. That's the best way.
I think just to add on to that, I think it's this all kind of leads to that vendors need to be in the detail on everything that they're doing, both in the front and the back end. All too often, I'll go into a potential client, and then you'll look at the front end, but then you study the back end and go, well, hold on a second, there's $100,000 that's sitting there that actually you've got to sell a lot on the front end to recover 100K in the back end. So I think it is that really detailed approach to understanding each of the ASINs, and it will normally be a handful of hero products that are driving that kind of discrepancy, whether it's chargebacks or whether it's shortages. What I've done in the past is I've set up a very specific task force, whether it's people within customer service, it could be finance, it could be the supply chain side of it, to go, actually, I'm now going to hang this number around your neck. So your KPI is to make sure that percentage around chargebacks or shortages is as low as possible. And actually, it needs to be at this level because it has to have focus. It has to be treated like a measurable or have a smart measure attached to it to ensure it's tracked and placed through the business as much as the front end.
Excellent. Thank you. And gents, I want to go off piece a little bit. I've got probably 3 questions on my list that were meant to be kind of like short, sharp, punchy ones and create a bit of debate, but almost every one of them has started to come in down the Q&A. So what I'm going to do, we've got kind of 20 minutes left. This Q&A looks like it could get actually quite engaging and quite interesting, some of the questions. So I want to start off with a nice, easy one, and I want to get into one that I think might throw the cat amongst the pigeons and create a bit of debate. So we're going to move to the audience Q&A. I'll pop these up on the screen as we go, open to anybody on the call who wants to kind of take these on as an answer. So we'll go with the first one that's come in from Salman. What is a must-have team structure or roles for small vendors that are starting out on Amazon? Anybody want to take that? I've got my thoughts, but any of you guys want to go there first?
I can try to help. As I just mentioned, even for small vendors, small teams internally, it's very important that at least, even if it's the same person doing sales and logistics as the main point of contact, finance is a different one immediately, because we need someone from accounting that will be trained to properly manage payment deductions and all of that. But even for a small vendor, it's very important that start aligning those responsibilities. What's each person responsibility to do, and then create those functions, those weekly tasks, those monthly tasks, quarterly tasks, and follow them and engage and start talking the same language. I think that the difference between 2 million a year or 1 million a year vendor and a 100 million, it's just the size of the team. But even for small vendors, ideally, you should have someone from sales, and those skills should tie to commercial thinking, strategic, data analysis that we didn't mention yet here. I think it's so important these days. Everybody's talking how AI will help. It will, but AI still doesn't have a sentient analysis like we as humans can have, because we can see something different in the numbers. And then someone from logistics, usually, and I support the idea to be the warehouse manager, that will help us to connect with the carrier, with the warehouse team. And then someone from accounting, that finance person, that will receive an extensive training for how is Amazon paying? What is this deduction? I keep seeing vendors saying stuff like, oh, I have $100,000 in open invoices and they only paid 70,000. I don't know what's going on, but they owe me this money. And then 10 minutes later, with a quick check on the data, I just go and say, look, actually those 30K that you're missing, it's because of the damage allowance, the MDF. There's a provision that didn't got reversed. Provisions are that challenge to manage, because Amazon deducts 1 month, pays back next month, but immediately there's another one. To have all of this cross-functional team aligned, each one of those people train in their department, but then in the end talking the same language. I think every vendor should be able to have at least one person for each one of the pillars.
So it's
that's my opinion on that.
There, Bruno. Yeah. Really easy thing. Thank you. Matt, from your side, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think even for any size team, you need to have someone in ops, so in the warehouse team, someone regularly reviewing content and optimizing listings, someone on paid advertising side, and then someone with more of a commercial focus, so like an account manager. So at least 4 touch points within any team working with Amazon. And then attached to that will be the finance sort of strand. Potentially the account manager could pick that up initially. But yeah, they're the 4 sort of main elements of a team that I think you need to have when working with Amazon.
Thanks, Matt. Ant, just because you're next on the screen, anything different to add there?
I would probably add, just make sure, I fully support actually what Bruno and Matt have said. I think it's absolutely right to have these multi-departmental kind of colleagues come together to manage Amazon. Education is a big piece. Just make sure you're educating the senior stakeholders on how you need to walk and talk on Amazon, because it will feel different. And what will normally happen on a brand that's just starting out on Amazon, there will be a lot of conversations around, well, why can't we get Amazon to do it this way? They won't do it that way. They will want to do it their way. So you need to adapt to their process. And that's quite painful for brands going through that setup. So having touch points across multiple departments really helps you understand how Amazon needs you to walk and talk. And if you can walk and talk in the way Amazon needs you to, you will grow quicker and more profitably. So it's really important to have that education and that learning as part of this team.
Right. Thank you.
And I will, if you allow me, Andy, I would just like to quickly add something to Ant. Very well said. It's so important because sometimes within a vendor internally, that C-level that needs to approve and everything can be a roadblock for the team. I've seen it happen. And grabbing Ant's words is like, oh, we're not doing it that. We always did it like this. Well, you agreed to supply Amazon. It's a B2B model. They will not change their internal compliances or rules just because of you. And I've seen it happen a couple of times where that C-level, it's so important for them to have some training too. And that training, it's not specific. It's not daily tasks. It's a training to help them understand what is Amazon vendor, how it works, because they usually are engaged in supplying Amazon directly through vendor, but they don't understand compliances, how it works. So they sometimes a couple of months down the road, they are receiving an email from the CFO saying, hey, what is this? We need to change this. Amazon needs to start paying this and stop deductions. They won't. And what I see there is sometimes a complete lack of understanding. And they signed the agreement. So it's very important that that C-level team is also trained and aware of how it works.
Thank you, Bruno. We're going to go to the next question, but let's just kind of add a little bit more to this. We've got a few very, very similar questions in. What are your thoughts on AVS specialists? Do you think they're worth the cost associated with it? And what should you be getting from it? We've also got some very similar questions asking around what's the role of an assigned vendor manager at Amazon? How do I get one? What's the value of it? So I think maybe if we take this in more of a broader sense around the AVS and the added value services that you can get from Amazon, do you think it's worth the cost associated with it? And what should you be getting from it? I suspect this might divide a few people. So over to you guys.
I'm happy to start on this. So yeah, obviously a hot topic in the vendor space, always causes a bit of a heated discussion on the various LinkedIn groups that we're in. I think the biggest misconception with AVS is that it's an account management service. It's not. It might be marketed by Amazon in a particular way, but often the way it's marketed doesn't necessarily reflect the reality. First thing to point out is that it's very expensive. You know, you're typically looking at 3 to 7% as a contra cogs agreement, which means you'll get 3 to 7% deducted from any invoices you raise to Amazon as a kind of trade term. So if you've got a big account or even a small medium account, you know, that can be very sizable. On the accounts that we do have AVS, we personally use it as a kind of almost like a point of escalation as last resort. We're doing 99% of the work, anything catalog related, advertising, marketing, operations. AVS will not help with that. At best, it is a point of escalation. It does kind of open doors to certain things such as deal placements, if your account is on the radar of a vendor manager, the vendor manager will often defer to the AVS. So their job title would be brand specialist, and it will be that person you're kind of dealing with typically on a weekly basis with meetings. They'll feed you reports which aren't particularly polished or offer too much value. But yeah, as Amazon has kind of evolved their kind of vendor management piece, the vendor managers themselves have become more aloof. They tend to rear their heads when they want something, typically around trade terms, if your account is kind of big enough and strategic enough in the category that they're managing. But yeah, in summary, we've offboarded quite a few clients from AVS just because the cost saving, was significant. What I would say is that on certain accounts, it is important. If the account is big enough, if you're kind of dealing pan-EU, there's going to be occasions where there's actually an insistence from the vendor manager that you have AVS. And in terms of kind of maintaining a good relationship with the vendor manager, ensuring that you're, strategic enough for them, it can be a good trade term to have, especially if you're in a position where you can swap it out with other things. So yeah, personal experience is it's not worth it, but if you get big enough, it might become necessary anyway.
I think I'll just add my 2 pence to that before I come in your direction, because I've got a funny feeling I might know some of your angle on this from our previous conversations, but we very much echo at VentureForge what you said there, James. We question the value of it quite significantly, particularly when you look at the turnover of some accounts and that percentage linkage. That's a very, very hefty fee. And I think when you start to look at what is an internal Amazon employee's motivation and directive, it's to grow Amazon's business, not to grow the client in our instances or the brand's business. So I think there's a big question for me there over what are they employed to do and the level that they're paid for doing that. When you look down what's included in those services, you're absolutely right. Beyond that point of escalation, there is nothing on there that an internal team can't do in a brand. Now, if you don't have that internal team, you can have agency support, and that often, in almost every instance, comes at a significantly cheaper price than doing it through AVS. Point of escalation being the only real difference. But I know when we've had a conversation around this, you've kind of had almost, I believe, a supportive view of that, but you've also countered it with, well, this charge is just one line in your terms negotiation with Amazon. So if you pull 3 or 4% from that negotiation, they're ultimately going to look to find that somewhere else, because what Amazon is looking at is how much money am I making out of this vendor. Have I interpreted your thoughts on that from our previous conversations right, Andy, or have you got a slightly different spin on that?
Yeah, it goes into the net PPM, so there is a commercial value to Amazon for it, and in exchange for that investment, you have a direct line into Amazon via a brand specialist. My experience over the last kind of 10 to 15 years with brand specialists has generally been pretty positive, but I tended to have approached it in a very different way. So when Amazon sell you the AVS service, they almost sell it like they're going to help you grow your business. And I will say it now and I will repeat it almost every time I talk about AVS. An AVS or brand specialist will not grow your business. The responsibility to grow your brand and business sits firmly with you, and even go as far as your vendor manager will not grow your business. They're just to make sure that you're growing in a profitable and sustainable way on their platform. So to get the most out of an AVS, you need to be really clear about what matters to you and why it matters to you, and you hold them accountable to that. And too many times I see brands go on a call and a brand specialist will be sharing a deck that you go, I don't really know what that's doing, and they're driving the agenda. You need to switch that round. You're paying for that service, therefore you're responsible for making sure you get what you want out of it. Excuse me. So I think it can be of value. I do agree with James that it's strategically there will be a point in your relationship with Amazon when you get to a certain size or visibility globally that actually you will have to put this service in place to make sure you can continue that strategic relationship. But if you're just UK focused or just Germany focused, it's making sure you understand how you're going to use it and what it's going to deliver you. And actually, if it does get to a point where that ROI isn't quite there, then absolutely you can go back to Amazon, challenge it. But if you give them 3-4% for AVS, they will want it from somewhere else. If you pull the plug on something, they are going to come back and want that investment in other areas potentially.
Sorry, I know we're tight on time, but there's one quick point I want to make. The quality just seems to be so variable, and what we've seen a lot of recently is they've kind of scaled that service. They're bringing graduates through. You look at them on LinkedIn, they've come out of uni and they've been at Amazon for 9 months. Now, how the hell can anyone have any comprehension of Amazon Vendor Central when they've been at Amazon for 9 months? I don't know what the training is like at Amazon for these people. I feel that it's probably 70 to 80% negotiation tactics and probably 10% day-to-day vendor management. That's not to say there's not good brand specialists. There are, but the good ones tend to get promoted pretty quickly, and the crap ones hang around for kind of longer than you want them to.
Yeah, I would echo that, James. I'm very conscious of time. The only point I would just add to that quickly is at VentureForge, we've interviewed numerous Amazon vendor managers, ex-Amazon vendor managers, brand specialists. Not one has ever passed first stage interview, and we're focused on how do you grow a brand on Amazon, not how do you grow Amazon's business. I think I would echo.
They don't know. They don't know how to.
They don't know. I always have the idea that those brand specialists are reading from a script. I would even challenge to confirm if they received any training regarding negotiations, really. It feels like they're reading from a script, and then they just can say, oh, it needs to be like this, or I cannot change those terms, or I cannot do this. And I would just add very quick that AVS is being sold as a great help to grow the brand. You guys are right. It's not tied to that. And let's keep in mind that with your cross-functional team internally properly trained, where the Amazon vendor web interface is a self-serving tool. A lot of the things that we are requesting that AVS brand specialist team to do, you should be having your team internally doing themselves.
Thank you, guys. I want to take one more question. Let's give a very quick answer on this from VentureForge's point of view, but I suspect this will be echoed by everybody before we move on to the wrap-up. I think Tom's question that's been sat there has got quite a bit of interest. What are people's views on Amazon's clear change in strategy to be more profit-led in 2024? The reason I wanted to bring this up in particular is I really think that summarizes almost everything we've talked about on this call. Amazon is clearly moving to being a much more commercially focused business. You look at where they've come through COVID, easy top-line revenue growth. You look where they've come through the period of inflation-driven top-line revenue growth. How does Amazon maintain its share price and revenue and profit growth in the coming years? Becoming more profit focused. So everything I think we talked about today, at the heart of it has been that commerciality question. How do you build a commercially viable vendor business? And what we've heard from the different people on today's call is from the top of the funnel, whether it's the advertising, marketing, content, growth services, all the way down to the bottom of the operational part of the funnel, you have to be looking at this commercially. Terms, leaky buckets in terms of profit, the right range selection, the quality of your content. It's a really crap expression, but I think if you're concerned about Amazon's focus on profit, it's a case of suck it up, because that is the lens that they will be putting on every vendor business for at least the next 12 to 18 months. And putting commercial rigor at the heart of everything you do for vendor, for me, has got to be the only solution to that. It's I would say it's got to get tougher, but it is becoming much, much more commercial and much more competitive. And what I'd also like to say, guys, is thank you very much to you, our guests, for joining us. That has been, even though we left more time for audience Q&A, I think what we've uncovered here is there's a real hot topic around vendors. So thank you very much to each of you from your respective businesses for giving your time, your thoughts, your expertise and your opinions. To the people that have joined us on the call, I really appreciate there are a lot of questions that we haven't got through. I've seen James, I've seen Jonathan from our side getting in there and answering a few. So thank you for that. But I will follow up with anybody who's got an open question, answer it directly or point it into one of our experts on the call today. I think final thing from us at VentureForge before we say goodbye and wish you farewell for the day is if you would like any help enhancing your brand's presence, profitability or commercial success on Amazon Vendor, hopefully one of my colleagues will be popping up a quick poll on the screen. tick the appropriate box or click skip just to get back to our wonderful faces on the call, and we'll follow up with you if that's appropriate after this call. Final thing for me again, guys, is thank you. I appreciate you've all given up an hour of your time, plus probably an hour or so prior to this to help us prep, make sure the tech works. Thank you very much for joining us, Matt, Ant, Bruno, James. Thank you for your time. And thank you to everybody who's joined us in the audience. We wish you farewell, and we'll see you on our next webinar in about 4 weeks' time. Thanks, guys. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.